Hey, listen, and welcome to a link to the Filmcast. I'm your host, David Reese, in the show where we adventure across the realms of Hyrule and the Silver Screen. This is episode 4 of the podcast, and today we're going to be looking at the NeverEnding Story. But first, we're going to jump into a random Zelda wiki page. Random page I have for this week is the Golden Monster, which is a level of enemy that has occurred in multiple games. I guess the one most noticeable would be Breath of the Wild. They have the gold tier. If you get the DLC, then you get like the golden Lionel to fight, which is, if you've done that fight, that's a fun fight. But then there's also golden Lizalfos, golden Moblins, and Bokoblins in Breath of the Wild, if you have the Master Mode. Master Mode I remember playing. It was a challenge. Could have been harder, but they did ramp up, and out the gate, it was rough. When you only have the 3 hearts, I biffed it on the Great Plateau many times. But as you get more hearts, the game's pretty much the same. A few enemies here and there pose a challenge or pose a threat, but other than that, the golden enemies also occur in other games, namely like Minish Cap. I kind of remember if you got into the Kinstones, then then you could get like a golden Octa Rock, golden Rope. I'm trying to remember what the other one, golden Tektite, according to the wiki page. And then apparently it shows up again in Oracle Seasons. There's some golden enemies, a gold Lionel, gold Darknut, Moblins, Octoroks, and then the only other game is one of the Tingle games that I'm not super familiar with. Freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land for gold tier monsters, which do I give it oxygen? It's just golden. It's just a golden enemy that drop more rupees in those games, so not anything super substantial. Just some housekeeping notes. This is just a reminder. Moving forward, starting with this episode, I'll be doing an episode every 2 weeks rather than every week. I want a little more time to work with the episodes, the production, since I'm doing everything myself and I'm doing this as a hobby part-time. I didn't realize how much work went into going into one episode, especially like the editing. And I really want to try to improve my final product that I send out here. I know this is only episode 4, but that's a decision I saw that I don't want to get podcast burnout. So that's just a little behind the curtains. Also, I got my pre-order in yesterday. Echoes of Wisdom is coming up September 26th. I've been watching some of the IGN videos. They have a first impressions video where they played a 90-minute demo from Nintendo with a PR person, talked about some of the mechanics and the starting parts of the game, kind of answered some of the questions I had in that Echoes of Wisdom anticipation episode we did. Some things were confirmed, like the limitations of the echoes. Certain echoes needed more energy than other echoes. Like the bed was 1 echo, but if you want to summon like a Moblin, that might be 2 or 3. And apparently the PR person kept emphasizing how big the world actually is, but you can't really tell. Like in that first 90-minute gameplay, they could tell. So I'm excited. Got my pre-order in. Comes out the 26th. Will be good to see a new Zelda game. And let's jump into our main story, the NeverEnding Story, which I've been thinking about how I've done the last couple episodes where I basically run through the story bit by bit, almost line for line. And when I'm listening to podcasts, I don't like it. They don't do that. They talk about the movie, things that work, that don't work, and I don't know how entertaining or value that is. I want to create a movie podcast here, movie and video game podcast that I would want to listen to, not just me rambling on scene by scene of a movie. I'm looking to switch up how I run through movies. I don't want to do a play-by-play, but we'll march through them. We'll march through them and talk about them, of course. I'll only quote dialogue or a little quip if it stands out or adds something to the movie. So the NeverEnding Story will be the first one that we kind of cover in this fashion. Growing up, this was one of the movies we had on VHS. I haven't seen this movie since I was a kid, so there was some nostalgia. Like, I knew cornerstones of the movie, but I didn't remember every little detail. Like, I didn't remember the bullies in the beginning chasing him down the street. I didn't remember some of the zany characters in Fantasia because a lot of them just don't matter. They're just there because they're trying to show the world is full when it's really not. I do remember the horse. When someone asks me if I've ever seen the NeverEnding Story, I can talk about the horse. I remember the horse, the giant turtle I totally forgot about. So it was kind of fun doing a rewatch. Looking at my queue of movies, it looks like everything we've done so far is something I've seen before. So I kind of have that nostalgic lens, or that lens of knowing what the movie's about. Not next week, not next movie, but the movie after that. That's going to be the first movie I'm going in blind. This is a movie I've seen before, though. Was I grade school? Or was I middle school? I remember reading the book at one point. I don't remember the content of the book other than telling myself, oh, this is kind of like the movie. But the book does this unique thing where the text is two colors. There's like the overworld where Bastion is reading the book in his school. That's one color, that's like green or red. And then whenever you're inside a Fantasia following Atreyu across his adventure, then the text is the other color. It was like green or red. Or maybe was it blue? But that's how they differentiated what world the narrative was being told. Just like in the movie Oppenheimer, they have the black and white scenes to kind of show the quote-unquote modern events going through the criminal, or not the criminal, but going through the investigation. But then when it's in color, that's telling the actual story of what happened during Oppenheimer's life. Kind of unique in the way of storytelling. Did some research on this story. Didn't know anything about it. Like, I knew it was a movie and I'd seen it. And I read the book as a kid thinking, okay, so it's a movie based on a book. But what was the book? The book apparently came out in 1979. It was a German book. And then like 5 years later, the movie came out. So it was a hit off the bat, that the fact they made a big movie. And at the time, it was the largest or the most expensive movie ever made outside of the US or the Soviet Union. It was still before the collapse of the Soviet Union. At the time, they were around 25 million US dollars to make this movie, which when you watch it, there's a lot of special effects, a lot of practical effects. Like, I knew Falcor was an actual thing they made. There's like a 43-foot long dragon of Falcor somewhere. It's probably at like a studio in storage or maybe on display. But that's a lot of money for the time, and it turned ahead. It turned a profit. It made about 4 times that. Hence why they were able to greenlight a sequel. The sequel had its own troubles. The author had a change of heart as the movie was going through production. Changes to the movie, or changes to the story that the author didn't quite like, kind of led to a legal battle and kind of delayed the second movie. Hence why they had to recast some of the actors for the second movie. But that's getting off topic. The critical reception of the movie. So we know it turned a profit. We know a lot of people in Germany liked it. Around the world, people had mixed feelings, though, a mixed bag of reviews. A lot of people liked it for creating a story and the hero's journey, just really sticking to the hero's journey formula. There's a bad guy, there's a princess, an empress, princess, same same it acts functionally the same in this story. But a lot of other critics rightfully pointed out that the effects look cheap and a lot of the green screen didn't really work well. And I think at the time I was reading they used a giant studio with a giant blue screen, and that's where they did a lot of the special effects, especially towards the end whenever there's flying around. You can obviously tell they just did that in front of the blue screen and then just inserted some helicopter shots. But this movie did go on to win some awards, and there is rumors that the production company that of the author that wrote the original book wants to make a series of films with Seesaw Films. It's another production company. They did The King's Speech. They're British Australian. There was some rumblings of that back in March. Now, whether any progress has been made on that, there isn't too much news right now. But I don't know. After watching this again for the podcast, I don't know if I'm in a hurry to see this movie again. Maybe I'll leave a review on Letterboxd. If you ever want to follow me on Letterboxd, we have ZeldaFilmcast is the username on Letterboxd. I'm going to start writing reviews as I'm watching these movies. Since I'm already doing the analysis, let's fill out a profile, talk about the movies, see what you guys are watching as well. You could tell big Hollywood production like out the gate. It wasn't Hollywood. It was a different company. It was a German production, and they shot some scenes in, was it Vancouver or British Columbia on that side of Canada. We watched the movie, and the first thing I noticed is that the product placement is there right out the gate. Most of the movie is in a fictional world, and there's only a few scenes where where it would make sense to have products. Because like at the very first scene, you see the Wonder Bread wrapper, the Ziploc sandwich bags, the Skippy peanut butter, all just on the table right there, just staring you in the face. That's the scene where freaking the dad is harping on the kid Bastion right out the gate. Yeah, I forgot about that. It kind of sets up why the kid is not real happy in the real world because his mom had recently passed away, and the dad's like, well, you're not doing your homework, you're not doing good in school, you didn't do tryouts, gotta be better, kid. And then he leaves it off with, nice talk, we should have more, have a good day, son, and just pieces out. That's all we get of the dad in the movie. So kid's down on his luck right off the gate. Not a good home life. And then we got the bully chase scene, which you'd think that why are they doing this? Just because they're evil? What's the point? Bastion finds the place to hide, meets the old guy. This is all we see of him. A lot of this stuff in the beginning we don't get full closure on, like his dad. We don't even see any school faculty, I believe. The library guy, the bookstore guy. Yeah, we only see him in the beginning, and he's kind of like setting him up for it. Kid name drops all the famous books, like Treasure Island, 20,000 Leagues, Lord of the Rings. And the bookstore's guy's like, okay, this guy can have this magical book. And I think the guy let him steal the book on purpose. When the phone's ringing, he just leaves it there and doesn't do anything about it. Doesn't chase about it. He even kind of eggs Bastion to take it. He's like, "Oh, you don't want this book. Oh, to you, books are only stories. This book is something more. Forget about it." And then he just lets the kids steal the book. And he ventures off to school, but instead of going to class, he just hops up into the school attic full of props and all that good stuff and opens the book and starts reading. And the movie cuts to this in and out throughout the entire duration. But the way this kid reads a movie or reads the book is like watching a movie. Only thing missing was the popcorn. There's points here in the movie, especially towards the end, where something's happening in the book and we do a flash cut to Bastion and he's just reacting to the book as if he was watching it in real time, which might just be a reflection on how people read books. Maybe that's just his way of intaking the book. I don't know if I've ever physical reactions while reading a book. I've had some times where I've kind of stopped and I was like, okay, interesting. But I don't remember ever sobbing, verbally saying stuff out loud like, no way, or no, don't do it as I'm reading a book. That might be something about the wonder of being a child. So we're introduced to Fantasia. We meet all these characters from different ends of the map. It's setting it up like it's going to be a gang travel movie, but then it's not. You know, it's setting up a campfire with a stone dude, hobgoblin thing, and like the merchant guy all around a fire with the Batman. And they're having a discussion talking about what's going on, setting up the nothing. And you're like, okay, cool. So our main character is going to show up, buddy up with these guys, and we're going to have an adventure, which normally happens in these adventure movies. It's not just one dude, it's a group of people. So that's the way the movie's even making it set out. But then that doesn't happen. The effects on the giant guy, I don't know what they were thinking. As he talked, it was making me cringe on how his mouth wasn't matching the words he was saying. I don't know if this was lost in translation. Well, they made this in English. So the reason why that happened, I have no idea. It's just bad. I remember even as a kid, there was an old series they did, The Chronicles of Narnia. And they did Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I remember seeing an Aslan where the mouth was just like mechanically moving up and down like on a timer. It wasn't matching any of the words at all, which I guess is something we take for granted in the modern climate with animation and all that. The mouths match, unless you're like into anime and you watch a lot of the subtitled stuff, or if you watch the dubbed anime, then it kind of happens, but it doesn't really bother people too much because they still kind of want to know what's happening. Weird effect. There's also the shaking earth from when the giant guy showed up. And to do that, they literally just shook the camera and had the actors act like the ground was shaking. As a kid, you don't notice. As an adult, I was like, okay, I see what they're doing here. That's a budget saving measure that they could get away with. So we have the travel. They're going to the ivory tower. We haven't seen our main character yet, and didn't notice this before. The giant bike the giant's on, the stone guy, doesn't have any wheel, or it has that front wheel and like two back wheels, but there's no pedals or anything. He's just Fred Flintstoning it around. He's using his feet to travel around. They get to the tower. Only one of them is able to make it up there in time because they got the bat and they can fly up, and they're just watching it through the nooks and crannies, which you would think if they're going to be the character you're following, why are they giving so much attention to these characters. The council meeting's commencing. Guy comes out acknowledging how the nothing's the scourge on the land and that the Empress is the one to save them. But the Empress is ill, and they believe it is connected to the nothing that's happening. And they know there's only one hope. Real classic call to adventure. A literal call for adventure. They literally called for Atreyu to come to the Ivory Tower. So Atreyu shows up, and he is tasked with the hero's journey at this point. At this point, I check, and I'm like, okay, we're only 20 minutes in. This is a 90-minute movie. This is a kid's movie, and this is only like an hour and a half. And by today's standards, or like with what I'm used to watching, this movie is pretty fast. This movie keeps moving. There's not too much filler. And if you look at it from a plot standpoint, we have our setup in the real world. We have the actual adventure, which is Atreyu having a literal call to adventure. And then he just goes from point to point to point to point to ending, really. I don't see it. There's a climax, but the stakes seem so superficial or not there that it didn't really feel like a climax. It just felt more of what am I watching and processing. We get some foreshadowing of a villain. As he starts his adventure, we get a lot of the helicopter shots, and we get a villain, the wolf monster, the wolf thing, just to turn out it's going to be one of like the lamest conflict points there is. Freaking, I got more upset about the horse than I was intimidated by the villain, the wolf guy. And then that takes us to the Swamp of Sadness. And this is the part where you could draw the parallel of Atreyu and Bastion both going through grief. They said that if you're sad, you sink into the swamp. And we know Bastion's going through stuff. You know, his dad is kind of a jerk to him, and he lost his mom. So he knows what the grief is like. But Atreyu's horse starts to get depressed. The horse doesn't think the journey will survive. And he freaking loses the horse, like, out the gate. It's not out the gate. There was a little montage, a little yada yada of he went to the 3 regions and didn't find nothing, and now we're going to go to the last region he hasn't checked yet. So the horse, I guess, did travel him, and there was a lot of yada yada of stuff that probably happened that we don't know about. I remember as a kid, his Artax, the horse, that was one of the first, when I first saw that scene, I didn't know how to process it. Because I didn't see a big drawn out death scene like that before in a movie. And you're not really attached to the horse, but the way that characters are acting around it, you resonate with it. You resonate with them. I still don't know how the horse loses hope. Does the horse know what's going on? Getting to the Swamp of Sadness. We got a stupid turtle that's allergic to humans. Kind of senile and not right in the brain. Kind of gives him the next plot point. Right? So the first point was to find a cure for the Empress. He's going all around Fantasia, and he's like, I can't find it. I know, let's go find the smartest being or the wisest being in the land. He gets to the tortoise, and the tortoise is like, okay, I don't know. I don't care, I'm loony. You know, what you want to do is go to the Southern Oracle. Points him that way. No help. Some comedic scene with the allergies didn't quite land for me. And then we're introduced to Falcor. We get the Falcor scene where they're meeting and talking, and I don't know what I think about this vocal performance for Falcor. Was a little unsettling to me. Just the way his voice and the inflections sounded didn't resonate with the character. I guess the character was supposed to be aloof and just not all there. Very punny. If there was a pun to do with something about having luck, he was sure to capitalize on it. Was it Teeny Weeny? Is that his name? We get the two elf guy, the elf couple. Very, very old school. Calling his wife like the wench, a wench. It's very a product of its time. Just super disrespectful to his wife. Kind of playing off the, oh yeah, old couples are always fighting and yammering at each other, perpetuating that stereotype. And I guess we have those stereotypes. They come from something, but do we always need them portrayed in movies like this? Granted, this is a 40-year-old movie. This movie I saw was in theaters around here a few months ago for its 40th anniversary. I don't think I'd pay money to see this on theaters again. I wouldn't. We get the Sphinx gates. They bump the stakes up. Like, just don't be afraid and you won't get blown to pieces, but they don't go into why. They even have like some sacrificial knight run through just to show that the Sphinx can destroy you. But instead of doing some practical effect, they do this weird, the lightning effect on the guy to show him down on the ground. But then later when we see him, he's all burnt. After the second Sphinx, that's kind of when the movie takes the dip for me. It gets to a real slow pace. They're showing some shots. He's flying on Falcor. They give the plot point at the second Sphinx Gate. How about this? Is that second Sphinx Gate the Southern Oracle? Yeah, but then it gives the plot point of, okay, all you have to do is to give the Empress a name, but it can't be from anyone here. It has to be from an Earthling outside of Fantasia. Great. What's that supposed to mean? We get a really anticlimactic Wolfie fight. The Wolfie fight is just like everything else in the movie. Pretty cookie cutter. And not even real cool. All it takes is really just one stab and he's down for the count. And the way I'm finishing this movie is kind of like the way I'm watching. Like, it had potential, but the execution was just so... What's the word? The execution just had a bunch of drawn out. It was real drawn out. I guess they're probably just pushing it for runtime. Because if you take a lot of this filler out, it's not that long of a story. The whole Empress thing. I didn't even catch the name he yells out the window for the Empress. I had to look it up. Moonchild is what he gives the Empress for a name. And then he gets a wish. Or he gets wishes. He can just get wishes now. The ending is kind of a mixed bag. If the whole beginning of the movie, he's processing grief and missing his mom. And you know what's his first wish that he wants to do when he's talking to Falcor? Nothing to do with the mom situation. It's, I want to get back at these bullies. Goes to the real world, flying Falcor, and basically puts the bullies back into the dumpster because they're so scared. That's the best ending. And then just flying around, kind of fist pumping in the air like, yeah, I'm going to go on more adventures. I don't know. The ending, like, it had a solid setup. It had two different storylines, the Bastion storyline and a Treyu storyline. It had characters. It had a call to adventure. There was a rub. There was a plot. And then they just kind of fumble. There's not really a climax, unless you want to consider talking to the Empress and having some weird meta dialogue between the Empress and Atreyu talking about Bastion, and Bastion just kind of saying, what the fuck? Can I swear? Yeah, I'm going to swear on this. But that's it. That's the most of the ending there is. I like some of the points as he's going on the adventure. The tortoise was fine with the Swamp of Sadness. The Sphinx gates were cool with the old couple. But other than that, there wasn't too much to fill on. The second half of the movie was kind of a letdown. I could make a really unpopular, I don't know if it's unpopular, I could make a comparison to a Zelda game right now. The second half of Wind Waker, right after you do the Tower of the Gods and you go underneath Hyrule Castle, and then you have to do the 2 Sage temples and then the Triforce quest. That was a kind of a clumsy second half. And Wind Waker, but I don't want to compare it. Say Wind Waker's ending was bad because the first, the puppet Ganon, whatever. Ganon's tower, like the actual dungeon, was kind of lame. But the Ganon fight was really cool. So I picked up the slack for what the ending was missing. It did something. Where this movie just kind of peters out. Which maybe I'll watch the sequel. Maybe I'll do that for this show. There's so many other movies I want to watch. And I realized all the movies we've covered so far are like 30 plus years old. The next one will be more recent, I promise. Still early on in the show. Still growing an audience. Still looking for questions. If you have questions, send them to ZeldaFilmcast@gmail.com or use the send a message link in the show description. Questions can be about Zelda, movies, life, or whatever the hell you want. But that's going to be it for this episode. If you like what you heard, tell a friend, leave us a review. This is a fan podcast made by a fan for fans. So if you have suggestions or feedback, I'd love to hear them. We have an account on X, formerly Twitter, @ZeldaFilmcast. And next time, we'll be watching something from this century, Transformers 2007, with Shia LaBeouf and other characters, Michael Bay. Gonna be a fun flick to watch. Thanks for listening, and may the Triforce be with you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.